they told us we were dead, manufacturers dead in America, China was going to eat our lunch. Well, guess what, man? We don't taste that good. So look, folks, I really mean.
Joining me now, Colonel Grant Newsham, former Reserve Head of Intelligence for Marine Forces Pacific, author of the book When China Attacks. Semper Fi, Colonel. Colonel, is China, quote, eating our lunch, at least when it comes to manufacturing?
Well, they're doing a pretty good job. If you don't believe me, just drive up to Baltimore or Youngstown, Ohio, or any major American city. See what's happened over the last 30 years. Yes, there's still manufacturing in the United States, but it's nothing like it was. They just moved too much of it to China, and we have problems aplenty because of that. So they're still doing very well. Wall Street may be finally starting to wake up. America's business class, well, you notice they gave Xi Jinping 2 standing ovations in November in San Francisco. They've got a ways to go.
Colonel, can you explain what China's naval shipbuilding capability is versus ours? Because as most people know, our naval ability in World War II is really what won the daggone thing for us.
Oh, yeah. Well, we still look at World War II and think because we did so well then that we're in great shape now. Such is not the case. China's shipbuilding capability is about 220 times more than ours. 220 times. That says everything. The Chinese have turned out about 5 or 6 ships for every one that we have over the last decade or so. Their navy's much bigger than ours now, and it's getting bigger. Ours is getting smaller. So this is something that's been allowed to happen, and we find ourselves in a very serious situation. We just can't build enough ships fast enough. We're not even close. And what happens if ships get sunk or if they need repaired? We don't have the shipyard capacity to handle any sort of a serious war.
And can you talk about that for a moment, Colonel? Because this is something people forget in peacetime, is if you go to war, they will get sunk and they will need repairs. Half of our naval ability in World War II was being able to haul those bad boys back to California or Pearl Harbor and weld them up and get them back out there. Japan could not do that. We won, they lost. That's important, is it not?
Oh, that's the key to everything. We hear about how it's high-tech warfare these days and war is different. Well, no, it isn't. You get hit, you lose ships, you lose aircraft, you lose people by the thousands, and you've got to be able to absorb that. But we've adopted this just-in-time manufacturing for our military so that we thought we would have no enemies in the future. We just needed a few ships to come out, 1 or 2 a year. That would be plenty. And boy, did we get that wrong. And this isn't something that happened quickly. You could see it coming over the last 20, 30 years. But the thinking was, in both the civilian and the military, is that we will never face a serious enemy. And meanwhile, China, in plain view, built up their Navy and their Air Force and have reformed their militaries to the point it is a very serious threat.
Colonel, can you speak to the quality? We'll focus on the Navy for a moment, although you're obviously welcome to speak to their air power. What's the quality of these ships? It's one thing to churn out ships, but if they're a bunch of steamers, that's not going to get you very far. What are they making?
Well, unfortunately, they're making the most modern ships you can make. We often took a very condescending view of the Chinese, thinking, oh, they'll never be our equals. Well, here they are. Around 2009, the commander of PACOM, or U.S. Indo-PACOM, Admiral Keating, he was in China, and he was asked, what do you think about the Chinese having aircraft carriers? And he said, well, that sounds good to me, and I will be glad to help them as much as I can. The thinking was they would never, ever be America's equal in terms of a Navy or any other form of military. And once again, they got that wrong. It turns out that China makes, as I said, first-class ships. Yes, they're not perfect, but they're certainly good enough, and in some cases they're better than ours. They seem to have less rust on them as well. And they've just got an awful lot of them, and they continue to build them out despite facing no enemies. So that ought to tell you something. But this is something we really ought to be afraid of. And do note that China generally introduces some new capability, probably 10, 20 years before all of the so-called experts, predicted that they would, and they have done this over and over and over.
What's their new capability we're worried about now?
Just about everywhere. Outer space, hypersonic missiles. It's just more missiles than you could shake a stick at. They're getting their anti-submarine warfare capabilities improved. They've got a ways to go, and our submarine force really is our ace in the hole. We could use a lot more subs, but it does give us a huge advantage. The Chinese know it. They are aware of sort of our strengths and are trying to counter them. And they are also building up their own capabilities. As I said, anti-submarine warfare is one. The ability to do joint operations farther afield from China, how to work in their space and their cyber, their missiles, all of these forces together, so that the parts are more than just the basic sum. They're figuring that out. As I say, they know their problems and they're trying to address them. Fortunately, they haven't worked all of them out. But this is something that we are suffering now from having sort of belittled the Chinese for too long. This isn't to say that we couldn't give them a real bloody nose right now, but the trends are not in the right direction. And if they chose their times and the spot, they could give us a very bloody nose, particularly if it's a fight near the Chinese mainland. Another thing also to consider is their aircraft carrier capabilities, the ability to conduct naval air operations. This is something that they thought they would never figure this out, which is going to take them too long. Well, they figured it out, and they're doing carrier operations east of Taiwan, south of Japan, in the areas where we are operating. They're not at our level yet, but as with a lot of things, give them time. And the point is that now we had better wake up and figure out how we are going to take them on and make it so they know that we can sink the entire Chinese Navy in an afternoon. We're not there yet.
Colonel, why haven't they taken Taiwan yet? We know they just had their election in Taiwan. It didn't go China's way. We think they're not going to let the Joe Biden presidency pass before they try something. Why haven't they done it yet?
Well, I don't know for sure. Xi Jinping hasn't told me, but I think they're ready. And I think what they're looking for is to particularly see what the United States might do. And they pay very close attention to the situation in the United States. And if they see us in chaos, fighting with each other, distracted, either domestically or, say, in Europe, the Middle East, well, the go signal sure looks like it's come on in that case. But if they see us as unwilling, unable to respond to an assault on Taiwan, then that is going to make it more likely that they do it. And I think that we really need to be very careful as to what happens starting about now, actually. And I think the closer we get to this election, and if there's rioting in American streets like there was in 2020, I think China will be sorely tempted. Xi Jinping has been trying to sanctions-proof his economy so that if there are financial and economic sanctions put on China as a result of going after Taiwan, well, they can absorb it. And he also knows that a good bit of the world, particularly the so-called third world or developing countries, is actually going to say, well, this is just a domestic matter. So they're not going to do much, or they might even support China on this. And in America, one can easily imagine a administration that doesn't want to have to deal with the potential of World War III. It's going to be able to think up all sorts of excuses not to respond to something China does. Wall Street is going to counsel, don't respond, the business class mostly as well. So China looks at all of this, and I don't think they have ever seen a better opportunity than now. And there's some debate over whether the People's Liberation Army is capable of conducting an all-out assault on Taiwan to seize the entire place. And as I say, there's debate, but I tend to think that they could easily think that they could do it based on the way their capabilities have developed.